Hi, I'm Tory Bruno. I've been a rocket scientist for 40 years, and I got to tell you that every single day has been an adventure. I have gotten the opportunity to do just amazing things. I have slept on a torpedo. I have shot a bullet out of the sky with another bullet. I have stood in the middle of Armageddon with all of its terrifying and awesome power. But I have also sent a spacecraft into orbit around the sun, the fastest human object in the universe, flying directly through the literal atmosphere of the sun. There is no career like a career spent in service to this great nation, service to the awesome cause of exploration, and service to the great calling of human dignity around this planet. And now, on the burn sequence, I'm going to pull that curtain back a little bit and let you look inside. So welcome to our show, and welcome to the burn sequence. Well, lately I have been thinking a lot about NASA. You know, NASA is an organization with just tremendous technical breadth and depth. There is no other institution like it in the world. They can do things that no one else can do. No company can do, no private equity investor can do. You know, they work with these people, but really NASA is the leader of all of that. They are absolutely a jewel, not just for our country, but for the whole world. And when I think about that and their exploration mission, you know, lately my mind goes right to the James Webb Telescope. That space telescope is a capability that no one could do. Only NASA could lead that, and it is leading to just amazing discoveries. You know, there is a raging, emotional debate happening in the world of cosmology right now. And if your nerd factor isn't running around 9.7, 9.8, you might not notice. It's kind of hard to tell because cosmologists, when they're yelling at each other and they're getting very emotional, it's actually difficult for normal people to actually notice that. But that's what's going on, mainly because of the data coming off of JWST. It is able to look backwards in time to the earliest moments of the formation of our universe, and it's seeing things that our theories and our standard model of cosmology say shouldn't be there. And so that stimulated this huge debate. You know, is the age of the universe what we've always thought it was to be? You know, is the Hubble constant, which is the rate of expansion of our universe, is it a different rate? Have we gotten that wrong, or are we just measuring it wrong? Questions like this are being asked and debated. You know, is the homogeneity of the universe, is the isentropy of the universe fundamental assumptions in the standard model? Is that really true? Because we're seeing other features like massive voids and things that just would not be predicted. And God forbid, Einstein's cosmological constant, is that truly a fundamental physical constant of the universe? Or did Albert just make up a plug number so he could match the data that was coming off of Edwin Hubble's research at the time? So this is all healthy. This is actually really good because that's how science works. These will be debated. People will arrive at new understandings. Consensus will be reached, and we will have a deeper understanding of our place in the universe as a result. All because NASA launched JWST and provided the astrophysicists and cosmologists with data to fuel these conversations and this deeper understanding. I also think about the way NASA builds bridges. There are countries that just have very little in common, or where they have interests, they're at odds on those interests, and they normally would not have productive or direct interactions with one another. But everybody sees the value in the inspiration of space, and over the years, NASA has brought those entities together in ways that no one else could do. I mean, even during the first Cold War, where it was the United States kind of faced off against the Soviets, and there wasn't a whole lot of things we agreed upon, we could always agree on joint research in space. And NASA, the space agency, was also an agency of diplomacy. And then when I look further, I think about the soft power that NASA brings to our country. And by that, I mean, again, during the Cold War, there was a lot at stake. Would civilization survive? If it survived, who would come out on top? Would it be the philosophy that valued individual freedom and justice and dignity, or would it be an authoritarian form of government that literally enslaved its own people? And there were countries in between that needed to choose. Many wanted to choose the path of freedom, but they also knew that if they chose the losing side, there would be dire consequences. And one of the things that they looked at was technological prowess, because in an age of technology ascendancy, they knew that mattered. And NASA was our standard bearer in a way that no other entity in America could do. Their just astounding accomplishments really made that clear in a completely peaceful way, that they were free to make a choice of their own will and not have that fear. Well, today we're heading into another Cold War, this one with an authoritarian government in China, and there are countries again being pressured to head in a direction they don't want to go. This is an opportunity for NASA again. Even though there are new technologies on the floor, things like artificial intelligence and quantum computing, space remains the marquee because of its powerful symbolism, but also because of the tremendous resources, the imagination-defying abundance of rare earth metals and precious metals and other things that are in space. It is tremendously important. So the question for us now, is NASA up to it? Is NASA still relevant? Can they be that force for good and for freedom that it had been the first time around? And it turns out I have the perfect guest today to talk about that. We're going to welcome Jim Bridenstine onto the show, former NASA administrator, former congressman from Oklahoma, Navy veteran, fighter pilot, just a really great guy. And I can tell you, besides all of those things on his resume, Jim is just a natural strategic thinker. He is an inspiring leader and just a wonderful person and a good friend. So I am very much looking forward to welcoming Jim Bridenstine onto the Burn Sequence. Jim, thank you for joining us on the Burn Sequence.
Well, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's start in. I'm going to give you a softball.
Okay.
When did you first get interested in space?
Well, I would say I didn't really start interest in space until later in my life. I grew up wanting to be a pilot. Going back to my days in first grade, our teachers had us draw a picture of what we wanted to be when we grew up. I drew a picture of an airplane. And I had a picture of a guy there with a hat on. So in my view, in first grade, pilots wore hats. And I said, in the bottom, I said, I want to be a pilot. And I spelled it P-I-E-L-E-O-T. So that shows you, I knew how to spell pie.
Yep.
But so it's, for whatever reason, I don't know what it is, I always wanted to be a pilot. And that kind of stuck with me through elementary school. And then the summer after fifth grade, the movie Top Gun came out. And that kind of just and I was worried. I was like, now everybody's going to want to be a pilot. I'll never be able to get to be a pilot. So that kind of stuck with me for my whole life. That same summer, my mom put me in and this is important for parents out there who are interested in maybe having their kids get involved in STEM. My parents put me in a 1-week summer camp where we got to play with a wind tunnel.
Oh my gosh, how cool.
Yeah, so summer after
This was fifth grade?
Fifth grade year.
Oh man.
And I understood what Bernoulli's theorem was, and I understood camber and aspect ratio and all these theories of flight. And then my dad would take me to the Carswell Air Show in Fort Worth. It just kind of was a thing all my life. And then I went to Rice University, and when I graduated, as I was getting ready to graduate, I was I'd majored in economics, business, and psychology. So I had 3 majors. None of them had anything to do with aerospace. But I'm interviewing with like investment banking firms and consulting firms, and I've got some really good job offers. And I called my dad, and I'm like, I'm not interested. Like, this stuff doesn't get me going. Like, it's not what I want to do. My dad was like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, it's the same thing I always wanted to do. I want to be a pilot. And he was like, well, I didn't send you to Rice to tell me you want to be a pilot. So His advice was go talk to the recruiter. And so I went through the process. Of course, the movie Top Gun encouraged me towards the Navy, and I got accepted into officer candidate school and flight school and all those things, and off we went. So aviation has always been in my blood. Then eventually I ran for Congress, and in Congress, what I recognized pretty quickly is that a lot of congressmen are lawyers.
Yeah.
And so they
go figure. Yeah. Lawmakers, lawyers.
Right. Yeah. So that when you start talking about technical things, and look, I was a pilot, but I wasn't an engineer. But when you start talking about technical things, they lose interest quickly. And so I realized I could have an influence there in significant ways because of my background in the Navy and having fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then that first year I was in Congress, Oklahoma got smashed by a tornado, killed dozens of people, hit an elementary school, children were killed. It was awful. And at the time, the Suami NPP satellite, which provides a lot of our weather data.
Yeah.
You know, when you get up in the morning, for the people that are watching, you turn on TV, you see a green blob on the screen, and it shows you where the rain is going to be.
Right.
80% of that data is coming from space.
Mm-hmm.
And that one of the satellites that produces that data, Suami NPP, was at the end of its life. It was having problems, and the JPSS-1 satellite was delayed. And we were about to have a gap. And I ended up being chairman of the Environment Subcommittee in the House of Representatives. So all of a sudden, I start delving into this issue because every year, my constituents get killed in tornadoes.
Yeah.
So it was all of a sudden, whether I wanted to be involved in space or not, I'm now involved in space. So we put together a number of different options to try to mitigate the gap. Commercial data buys for GPS radio occultation,
sure.
Some other things. And that kind of started me down this path of space. But I was also on the Armed Services Committee. The national security implications of space as a Navy pilot are significant.
Oh, yeah.
We were having issues there. And so then I started delving into the national security stuff deeper and deeper. And then we got to the point, and you were a big part of it, we drafted a comprehensive space reform bill called the American Space Renaissance Act. And that got the attention of a lot of people in the space industry. And I think that's kind of what prompted President Trump eventually to ask me to be the NASA administrator. So that's a much longer answer than you were looking for.
No, it's a great story.
But there's a lot in there. But so how about you? I mean, what encouraged you to get active in space?
Well, I'm a little bit older than you are.
I didn't notice.
And so, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take that. Even though it's not true. But I'm just old enough to have been 9 years old when the moon landing happened. And, I remember sitting cross-legged on the floor, in front of the black and white TV. We went to a neighbor's house because they had a bigger TV than we did, and they had better reception.
There you go.
And I was just captivated, and I was kind of locked in from that moment forward.
Yeah.
And so that's what got me. But, I got to ask you, so, is it harder to land on a carrier, or was it harder to land a rover on Mars?
Oh, that's interesting. So as far as flying, like the rover is all autonomous when it now make no mistake, there's amazing people that put all that together, and I am not one of them. But you can just judge based on the elation. It's crazy, they get one little blip, a signal on a screen, and everybody just goes crazy. and as the NASA administrator, you're watching that and you're realizing how much of their lives they've put into getting that one little blip on the screen. And then when I was the NASA administrator, Spirit and Opportunity were great rovers. And I was the NASA administrator when Opportunity finally died. And I went out, and it was like a funeral. It was devastating to the great folks at the JPL.
And it already lived way past its design life.
Like 15 years past. It was an amazing rover.
It was like that here. So first off, brownie points for talking about spacecraft we launched.
Okay, good. There you go.
But people were people became emotionally attached.
And just to be clear, There's only one company that's ever launched anything that landed on Mars, and it's ULA. And I don't know, you've done it 9 times, something like that at this point?
Yeah,
It's,
over 9, 20
yeah.
different objects, 20 missions, if we count the things that orbited
Yeah.
Mars. Yeah. Mars is ours.
Everybody talks about Mars and what's going to happen in the future. People forget today, right now, we've got stuff on Mars doing stunning discovery. We're looking for life in river deltas that have been long dry.
Yeah.
And all of that is compliments of ULA's stunning achievement of success.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
What would you pick? The one thing that was the coolest thing you got to do as administrator?
Oh, man. It's interesting because a lot of people think the NASA administrator is involved deeply into missions or into science, discovery, exploration. I will tell you, if you spend 1 minute getting deep into those kind of things, you're doing the job wrong. And I know every NASA administrator is different, but I saw my job as making sure that NASA was resourced to achieve the president's agenda. That's it. And so to do that, you're working with the Office of Management and Budget, the Office of Science and Technology Policy, the National Space Council, the National Security Council, the Vice President's Office, the President's Office, and you're trying to get everybody aligned. You've heard what the President has said, you've seen the space policy directives, and you're trying to get a budget that reflects those objectives. And it's a very political process, even inside your own administration. And I will tell you, I loved it. Like, I really did. It was just enthralling in so many ways. Because it played to my strengths. Like, I understood enough about what NASA did and what they were trying to achieve, and I also understood how politics work.
Yeah.
Because I was in the House of Representatives. So, but after you get that budget request, and while you're working on it, you're also traveling the world, trying to get all of our international partners on board at the same time, which is not easy. A lot of people realize we have pulled the rug on our international partners on a lot of programs.
Yeah.
And so getting them to believe that we're, no kidding, going to the moon, and this time we're going to stay, and we're going to use this technology to go to Mars, and it's very real, and we're increasing our budgets to do it, and we need you to increase your budgets. The hard part for me initially was I was talking to the heads of space agencies, and after doing that for 1 year, I realized the heads of space agencies from around the globe, they take budgets. They don't make budgets.
No, they're already all in. You didn't have to convince them of anything.
They're all in. So the second year, I said, okay, no more heads of space age. I want to talk to ministers of finance. I need to talk to prime ministers, ministers of finance, the people who can set forth a budget that is commensurate with what we're trying to achieve with our international and our commercial partners. And then we had real success. And so I think all of that, I loved all of that. I would also say, after you get the international partners on board and you get a president's budget request that reflects the priorities, that's when it starts. Because now you've got to go sell it to 435 members of the House and 100 senators. So I was doing town halls. Look, I was appointed by President Trump, and I was doing town halls with Speaker Pelosi in California.
I remember that.
On Women's Equality Day.
Yeah.
We were going to the moon with the first woman. Speaker Pelosi was very supportive of that. We called the program Artemis, the goddess of the moon. And so all of those things are very, they're important for the country. They're important for the globe. President Trump was, all in, and then you had international partners jumping in behind us and getting Congress on board. Again, I did town halls with Republicans and Democrats across the country. And when COVID hit, this is interesting, Tory, I was able to do more town halls with members of Congress.
Because you could do it online. I had the same experience. Yeah, it was crazy.
I was building far more consensus in the time of COVID than I could when there wasn't COVID, which I thought was not anticipated, but still amazing. So anyway, those are some of my highlights.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, I thought you were amazing.
Well, thank you.
I personally worked with 3 administrators, and each of you were very different. And brought the skills that were needed at the right time. I work with Mike Griffin.
Yep.
I think you know Mike
Very well. Smartest guy.
Smartest guy, rocket scientist, very technical, returned to flight, the guy that we needed then.
Yep.
Charlie, astronaut, he's wonderful. And we needed you when you were administrator. And I'll tell you, I never told you this, but, I used to go on the Hill a lot. You know that.
Yep.
Yeah, mostly just to let people know what's going on and answer questions, that kind of thing. I always look forward to coming to your office because, as you point out, a lot of members are not as interested in the technical stuff. And we were back there because we were developing a new rocket and we were doing missions that were important to people. And so they wanted to be statused on that stuff by, the launch company, which is all rocket science, which, they bless their hearts. They wanted to know, but it was hard to hold their attention. Yeah. And I go, I get to go see Jim. He loves this stuff.
I do. I was kind of and just, I loved it when you can't, because I would learn. Like, that's how, as a member of Congress, you bring in experts and CEOs from companies that are doing amazing things. Those meetings, like, there's a lot of meetings you get from across your constituency.
Yeah, of course.
And a lot of them you take because you have to. But whenever you came, it was, I just loved it because I'd learned so much. And by the way, your hearings, you were not shy in those hearings about telling members of Congress exactly what they needed to hear. Transitioning to, for example, the EELV program at the time, now NSSL program. I remember being stunned when members of Congress were telling you that we need you to keep the Delta IV Heavy going, but we also need it to be commercial. And I remember you saying, you can't do both. If you want us to be competitive commercially, we got to do something else. And interestingly, they would fight you on it, and they wanted both ends of they wanted the Delta IV Heavy, but they also wanted you to compete commercially. And most people come into Congress and tell them what they want to hear. You were very firm and direct and said that's not going to work for us, and we will retire the Delta IV Heavy. And I was kind of surprised because that's not what you get from a lot of people. What we need now more than ever in the space industry in general are truth tellers. We got a lot of people that will tell whoever whatever they want to hear, knowing full well that it's not true, that it's not achievable, that it's going to go way over cost, can't be done. But it's what somebody wants to hear, and so they go along with it. And you always told the truth, and I was grateful for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I never felt that I was a good lobbyist, and at least in the way people think lobbyists work, where you go in and you convince them of some partisan position. I always felt like, what I'm going to be better at is just explaining these complicated things and trying to be as honest as I can.
Yep.
So that's how I approached it. I think, Jim, that you were a very inspirational leader as the head of NASA. You talked about making NASA work and getting NASA the resources it required and all those big policy things. But you just had a way of making these missions so relatable and so inspirational. You didn't just capture heads of finance. You got the whole country, really the whole world, inspired about NASA again and that broader space mission. I really admired you for that.
It's interesting. I would tease inside the NASA headquarters, win the crowd, win the freedom. Yeah, I don't know if you watched the movie Gladiator. If you win the crowd, you'll win your freedom. And I would say, look, if we win the crowd, we'll win the budget. We've got to do stunning things. People need to know that America is back. We're going to do big things. We're going to the moon. We're going to Mars. American greatness is going to be reestablished. But you got to win the crowd. And so we worked hard on that. We did social media really strongly. Every chance I got, I would go on TV and explain why we were doing what we were doing. But it was a lot of fun. It was tiring trying to do it while you're traveling and visiting all the NASA centers and all the congressional districts and internationally. But I'll tell you, like I said, it was enthralling. I loved it. It was hard. I was younger then. I had more hair then. It was stressful, but I think we ended up in a pretty good spot at the end. I will tell you, I've been terribly disappointed with the flattened NASA budgets over the last 5 years.
Oh, yes.
25% inflation and a flat NASA budget. What does that do? It crushes momentum. It makes our international partners concerned. We've got to get that back. And I know we see from members of Congress. And I think we're going to see the administration, support a lot of what Congress is doing in the reconciliation bill to get those budgets back where they need to be.
Well, I hope so, because I feel the same way. I think there are people out there who just don't appreciate the tremendous breadth and depth that NASA has, that the missions that no one else could do but NASA, no one. And they think that maybe a private company can come in, or we'll sprinkle some, private equity investment on something, and that'll just do what NASA can do. I don't believe that, and I wonder how you feel about it.
So I think it's a mix. I think there are things that can and should be commercialized. And I know you feel the same way with how we do commercial crew to the International Space Station.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're excited about Vulcan being certified for that eventually, and Starliner being, ready to fly again, and all those things I think are critically important. But I think in any scenario, if you're going to buy a service instead of hardware, which I think is the direction a lot of things are going now, given the commercial capabilities that are out there. If you're going to buy a service instead of hardware, you have to have multiple providers. They have to compete on cost and innovation and safety. By the way, you can tell me better than I know, how many successful flights has ULA had in a row?
Oh, I guess we're 165.
And we're going to knock on some wood as we say this. But that's a stunning achievement in itself. And so, we need people competing on cost and innovation and safety. We need multiple providers, and those providers need to go get customers that are not always NASA. And to the extent that we achieve that, when we think about, for example, the ULA backlog and how many launches we have going forward, how many total launches have we sold already for Vulcan?
Just for Vulcan?
Yeah, just for Vulcan.
It's 90.
90.
Over 90.
So that takes us through what, 2028, 2029?
It'll take us to 2029.
Okay. That's a lot of, so again, you're getting customers that are not the U.S. government.
Right.
That drives down the cost to the taxpayer. It increases access to space. So it's a blend. You've got to do both. You've got to have commercial.
I agree.
Yeah.
And, we, historically, we were a government provider.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that competition is so healthy for both parties. When you're the buyer, you've got choices, and you've got people who are really, really interested in doing better for you every year. When you're a company, if you don't have competition, it's really hard to invest in technology and innovation, because you have to go in front of owners or a board or investors and say, hey, I'm going to spend $200 million on this thing. And they go, cool. And what advantage will that provide? What's going to be different after you do it? And when you're a sole source provider in an environment where there is no competition, a lot of times you have to say,
right,
it'll be about the same. We'll continue to do all the missions for our customer. It's hard. It's a hard sell. But when you have that environment with competition, you can justify that, and it really drives innovation. It's good for the company. It's good for the customer.
Yeah.
So I'm with you.
Yeah. And that competition, I think, is important, whether it's launch, whether it's space stations that are coming next, whether it's access to the moon. Anytime, and I've always said, government monopolies are necessary in some circumstances. When you think about the defense of the nation, for example.
Sure.
There are times when you need government to be the lead. There are other times, in my view, where you want to get private capital, and you want to get those innovators from the venture world or from the private equity world, and blending all that together, I think, is what differentiates us today from where we were even 15 or 20 years ago.
I think so. And you said it right. It's a blend. I'll say the bad tendency I often observe when I'm in the government working hard problems with people is this temptation, this black hole draw to the easy button.
Yeah.
What's the one thing I can do, and now this problem is solved, and I'll move on to something else. And it's almost never like that in these big complex environments. You need both. You need private investment, you need missions that are now where technologies are mature enough, the industry's mature enough to hand it over as a service. But if you don't have a bunch of missions that nobody can do but NASA's not doing its job.
That's right. Right. No, that's right. So NASA should be considering, how do we move forward and do things for which there's nothing commercial yet available?
Exactly.
And how do we commercialize the things that we've already proven are possible?
Right.
So low Earth orbit, I think, is commercializable. Make no mistake, there's going to be a need for government activity there 100%. But there's a lot of commercial benefits to microgravity and other things. So I think there's going to be a blend. I would also say it's important to recognize we don't like government monopolies. Bad. The only thing worse than a government monopoly is a private monopoly that the government is dependent on, where the private monopoly has purchasing power over the American taxpayer.
Right.
Or pricing power over the American taxpayer. So in all circumstances, when it comes to space, when it comes to national security, when it comes to these important missions, the government has to play a role. But it's also true, we have got to figure out how to bring more innovation in, and that's happening every day, and we're seeing it more and more.
Well, it's the great power of our system that countries like China and like Russia don't have.
That's right.
That government private industry partnership where we can bring in that innovation, those crazy ideas that are not directed downwards in a control economy like we see over there. So yeah, I agree. And it's no secret ULA had been a monopoly. It was a monopoly because there was only one domestic provider capable.
Right.
And I came here because that was changing, and I embraced that. I thought it was good for the country. It was going to be good for us.
And it's a tough corner to turn.
Yeah, it was really
And
hard.
I watched it when I was in the House of Representatives. I watched it, and it's a tough corner to turn when you have that type of monopolistic position. They bring you in as a CEO and they say, okay, now we're going to be cost competitive, and we're going to be, and you said, okay, we need a new rocket, and you're telling members of Congress things they don't want to hear, and you're saying, if this is the new world, we're going to compete, and you've done it. You've done it. So congratulations.
Far, so good.
There's more to do. There's always more to do, but that's the glory of a competitive world.
So I got one more heavy question for you.
Okay.
Is it important that we return people to the moon, and is it important that we in America do that before China?
The answer to that question for both is yes, and there's a lot of reasons. The value of the moon, there's so many different values to the moon, but we talk about natural resources. There's been a lot of talk recently about natural resources in Ukraine or natural resources in Greenland. People don't realize there's tremendous amounts of natural resources on the moon. Rare earth metals, although in this case they'd be rare lunar metals, platinum group metals.
Yeah.
These are, in most cases, we're talking about asteroid impacts.
Right.
The challenge with the Earth.
Helium-3.
Helium-3, exactly. And we need to do a whole show on that maybe in the future.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, yeah. You're probably one of the only podcasters that can probably delve into the technology behind all of that. So that will be fun. And by the way, I would want to be on that podcast because I'd be learning from you, not the other way around, just so you're aware. But when we think about the Earth, rarely does something impact the Earth from space because we've got a thick atmosphere. When something does impact the Earth, we've got this active geology.
Yep, geology eats it.
Eats it up. And something that impacted the Earth 1 billion or 2 billion years ago is now in trace amounts, if you can find it at all.
Right.
And the moon doesn't have an atmosphere. It's being pelted all the time. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, as it's going around the moon, we're looking at new images all the time. And you go over the same spot twice, and it never looks the same.
Yeah. Launched that one too, by the way.
There you go. Go ULA. So the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter is evidence that the moon is constantly being pelted. Right. And the Earth and the moon are a system, so we're flying through the same space at the same time. And when we go through an asteroid field, we go together, and those asteroids don't hit the Earth, they hit the moon. that's where the rare lunar metals would come from, platinum group metals. And so I think it's important for us to recognize we could find large deposits there. Now, are we too early to go out and grab them and bring them home? Yes, but we didn't create the CLIPS program for no reason, Commercial Lunar Payload Services. We created CLIPS because we want commercial companies to have access to the lunar surface.
Right.
Not just to get rare earth metals or rare lunar metals or platinum group metals, not just to get helium-3, but of course the water ice, hydrogen is fuel, oxygen is air. So all of those reasons I think it's important. But I would also say the value of the moon goes beyond the surface of the moon. The value of the moon includes Lagrangian points, which are points in space where you can stay for long periods of time. Maybe you can tell me about the Lagrangian.
I can tell you all about Lagrangian points.
But
yeah.
The interaction between the Earth's gravity well and the moon's gravity well creates these opportunities to, quite frankly, hide in space for long periods of time.
Yes.
And our enemies are taking advantage of that. And it's not just those L points, but it's also like rectilinear halo orbits and other capabilities, mass volumes of space. In space, we need sensors, we need communication capability, we need navigation capability, and we need it in deep space around these very, a lot of tension right now on Iran.
Yes.
And a lot of attention because of that on the Strait of Hormuz. As a Navy pilot, I can tell you, we got to have the Strait of Hormuz free. At some points, as much as 40% of the world's oil supply went through the Strait of Hormuz.
Right.
If you disrupt that, you fundamentally bring America to its knees. And so we've got to keep the Strait of Hormuz clear. And that same with the Strait of Gibraltar or the Strait of Malacca. Like, as a Navy guy, these are very important to me. But when we think about the future, these L points, these Lagrangian points in space, are going to be very similar.
Yes.
We have got to know what's going on there. We've got to make sure that we have not just knowledge of what's going on there, but we've got to be able to assess intentions and respond if necessary. Look, if you can attack from above, you can attack without warning. And Chance Saltzman very adeptly put forth the theory of competitive endurance. And, the number one thing is avoid operational surprise. Mm-hmm. I love that. Quite frankly, we're not there yet.
Nope.
But with the investments that America will make, and of course with the launches from ULA
and others,
we're going to get there. So the moon is critically important for a lot of reasons economically, for a lot of reasons on the exploration and discovery side. But I would say overwhelmingly it's important for national security and defense.
Oh, I agree. And what an opportunity also for humanity. The abundance of natural resources on the moon and the near-Earth objects just outside the moon's orbit are imagination-defying. The history of conflict on this planet is completely dominated by competition for resources. And here is wealth beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Yeah. And if we allow an authoritarian government, for example, to control that opportunity is denied humanity.
That's right.
So there's a bigger picture here.
Yeah. Can I bring up something that your audience needs to know?
Yes.
Okay.
Please do.
So I haven't done a lot of media or podcasts since I left NASA, but I am super excited about the burn sequence. I'm episode 2.
You are.
Who was episode 1?
General Les Lyles.
Les Lyles. Okay. So I'm happy to be number 2 to Les Lyles. I'm not insulted at all. But if it was anybody else, it'd be a problem. But I would say I love this cup. It is just so everybody can, I don't know if you can zoom in on this or not, but it's a picture of a dude on a horse with a cowboy hat and a lot of fire behind him coming out of a rocket. And one thing that I appreciated when I was the NASA administrator, and I got lots of comments on it, whenever we would come down for a launch, a ULA launch, whether it was Parker Solar Probe or something else, Ingenuity, Perseverance, whatever it was, we would always tool around the rocket with your cowboy hard hat. And I would get so many comments on social media about how come how come you don't have a cowboy hard hat? And I've got to get one. So at some point, I'm anticipating that you will allow me to get that cowboy hard hat, which of course is what you're wearing, likely on this horse on this. Tell me if it's all right. Why are you on a horse, and why do you wear a cowboy hard hat?
Oh, well, I have horses.
Okay.
I grew up on a ranch and dreaming about space.
There you go.
And so now I get to do that work, but I also get to still have a little bit of property and my horses. And when I'm home on a weekend and I get a little bit of time, that's where I'm at.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I got to ask you, like, one kind of important question related to that. So are you familiar with the parody Twitter account, Tory Bruno's Mustache?
I've heard of that. It's been a long time. I've heard of that.
Because I heard a rumor that you knew something about it.
Yeah. Was that the Perseverance launch, I think?
Yeah, probably. It was COVID. That's why I had the big handlebar mustache.
Yep. It was, no kidding. COVID. That's the challenge with Perseverance. Mars 2020. Mars and Earth are on the same side of the sun once every 26 months.
Right.
And so it doesn't matter if COVID hits, you still got to launch.
Right.
And that was a challenging time because everybody was shutting down everything, all of our suppliers, and we still had to deliver Perseverance and get it launched. ULA was tremendous in all that. You guys got it done. It worked. I would also say, that whole mustache thing, I remember because we took off our masks.
Mm-hmm.
We took off our masks, and you had this massive handlebar mustache, which I had never seen before. And one of my social media guys at NASA created a Tory Bruno's Mustache account, and we'll just say it was a pretty popular account.
Yes, it was.
And Tory Bruno's Mustache had quite a personality. So
I think he may have had more followers than I did at one point.
That very well could be. It was gaining quickly.
I got to move to the lightning round.
Okay, lightning round.
I'm going to offer you two things. You got to pick one.
Oh,
You
no.
can explain why if you want to, but you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
So you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Kirk or Spock?
Oh, Barf the Mog. I'm a fan of Spaceballs. Barf the Mog is my favorite character. He's half man, he's half dog.
Yes, I love Barf the Mog.
He's his own best friend.
Yep.
So I don't know if that probably doesn't count. I'd go with Kirk. Kirk is the leader of the Starship Enterprise. Amazing leader.
Well, who else would a fighter pilot choose?
Yeah, but I will tell you, you've really, I mean, there is no character in all of sci-fi like Barf the Mog. So
that is very true.
Yeah.
All right. Teddy Roosevelt or JFK?
Oh my goodness. So I got to go JFK, and I'm going to tell you why. I went to that university in Houston, Rice University on South Main. Go Owls, hoot.
Oh, yeah.
We won the Southwest Conference Championship in football in 1994. We won the College World Series in 2003. And of course, John F. Kennedy came to Rice to give the moon speech, the famous moon speech, 1962.
Yes, yeah.
And in that speech, he's talking about all the hard things we do, why fly across the ocean, why climb a mountain, why go to the moon. We do these things because they're hard. In there, everybody forgets this. He says, "Why does Rice play Texas?" and of course, the answer is because we win. That's why Rice plays Texas. 1994, I was on the sidelines when Rice beat Texas in football. It was a glorious day, and so I give JFK credit for that 1994 victory over Texas.
Outstanding.
There you go.
Can't beat that.
Yeah.
All right. Perseverance or Parker Solar Probe?
Oh, I'm gonna go with Perseverance. I really think there's so much going on Mars that is going to be transformational. How we view ourselves. I know it's lightning round, but I got to pause here. When I was the NASA administrator, it wasn't that much time, but in those years, we found that Mars has methane cycles that match the seasons.
Right.
That's stunning. It could be geological, but it could be biological. We saw methane plumes that were of such size that a lot of folks were saying that can't be geological, not that we know of. In other words, it would be biological.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then we discovered, of course, complex organic compounds all over the surface of Mars, the building blocks for life. And for the first time, we found that there's liquid water 12 kilometers under the surface. Anywhere there's liquid water on Earth, there's life. Is that true on Mars? We don't know, but we should find out. So all these things. And then after I left, NASA put out a research paper not too long ago, and they said that there's enough liquid water on Mars that if you brought all that liquid water to the surface, it would cover the surface in an ocean that would be, I don't remember what the number was, but it was multiple kilometers deep.
Yes.
And it's liquid. That is an amazing piece of information. So I love the Parker Solar Probe flying through the solar corona, through the sun's atmosphere. Again, stunning achievements. We need to understand the sun, because when we go to the moon, those corona mass ejections or solar flares, they can be very dangerous for our astronauts when they're not protected from the magnetosphere that we have here on Earth. So we've got to understand the sun. We've got to be able to predict all those things. But it's also true that once you're on the moon, in many ways you can be protected by getting under.
Yes, you can.
Under the surface. But all that to say, I think if we make a discovery on Mars that I think is possible we could make, it will forever change how we see space exploration. And I think the NASA budget and other budgets are going to go through the roof. Because people are going to want to know, okay, well, if there's life on the planet that's closest to us, what else is out there? Then you start looking at the moons of Jupiter and the moons of Saturn. There's lots of opportunity for life out there.
A watershed moment in human history.
Watershed, there you go.
Yeah.
Exactly. Got it.
Well, we'll make sure that Nikki Fox does not see this episode.
Right.
Or the version we send to her. We'll dub over you. Alexis will come in and say, Parker Solar Probe.
There you go. Some AI function.
All right. Okay. Delta IV Heavy or Vulcan?
I'm going Vulcan. Look, the Vulcan is the future. Our country's going to need it. It's going to be launching all of our most important national security capabilities. High energy orbits. It's critical to the security of the country. Not that Delta IV wasn't. It was as well. But the Vulcan's going to be competitive for a long time.
Yeah. Driving
down costs, increasing access, all those things are important. So I'm going Vulcan.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I'll miss Delta IV Heavy. I miss her already.
Yeah.
The most metal of all rockets, set herself on fire before she left the pad. And last, Coke or Mountain Dew?
I'm going to go, I got to go Mountain Dew Baja Blast Zero Sugar.
Oh my gosh.
That's my new go-to. Now,
all right.
I would have said when I was the NASA administrator, Diet Mountain Dew. I go Mountain Dew in general, but Diet Mountain Dew. But now it has switched over to Mountain Dew Baja Blast Zero Sugar. It's like the nectar of the gods.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Since we're over time, I'm going to tell you one quick little story.
I'm thrilled.
I probably shouldn't, because I'm going to talk about a guy and I don't have his permission.
Uh-oh.
But you know how I love coming to see you because you love space. There was another guy in the administration who also loved space. Secretary of Commerce. Remember Wilbur Ross?
I do, yeah.
We'd come into his office and, he'd been doing commerce stuff all day, banking and things that were in his portfolio like salmon fishing rights and crazy stuff like that. But he also had NOAA. And we'd walk through the door and his staff would roll their eyes and hang their head because he would sit there the rest of the day with me talking about rockets, blow up his entire calendar. And it was like that when I came to see you too. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for saying that. And yes, Wilbur Ross was an amazing secretary. And we actually worked on a lot of things together. Secretary of Commerce, NASA administrator, we're all trying to develop American industry.
Yeah.
And he was keenly focused on all of the activities that NASA was doing and how do we lead commercially in space and all that stuff.
Yeah, he was great. Yeah, and so were you. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you for yours. It's been great being on your podcast. Let's do it again.
Yeah, let's.
Okay.
We'll do one just on helium-3.
We'll do it.
All right, Jim. Thanks again.
You bet.
All right, so that was a really fun conversation with Jim. I could talk to Jim all day long, but now we're done. Maybe we'll bring him back another time. But for now, we are exiting the burn sequence. Thank you for joining us. Like and subscribe.